Thanks for coming back to another Crypto Sherpa video where you're here to learn about cryptocurrencies. And what better way to learn about cryptocurrency by understanding where Bitcoin actually comes from and where it all started. And with that, I want to bring you the white papers of Bitcoin. So sit back and enjoy. So to start off, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system by Satoshi Nakamoto. In abstract, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if trusted third parties is still required to prevent double spending. We will propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. The longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as the majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attacking the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will. Accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were going. Very interesting. So let's go with part one, the introduction. Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions, serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough, most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practice transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small casual transactions. And there is a broader cost in the loss of ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be wary of their customers hassling them for more information than they will otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. These costs and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over communications channel without a trusted third party. Now what is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of a trust allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. In this paper, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. So very interesting and good proposal. Moving on for part two, transactions. We define electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owner. And adding these to the end of the coin, a payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership, as you can see in the diagram presented to you. The problem, of course, is the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority or mint that checks every transaction for double spending. After each transaction, the coin must be returned to the mint to issue a new coin, and only coins issued directly from the mint are trusted, not to be double spent. The problem with this solution is that the fate of the entire money system depends on the company running the mint. With every transaction having to go through them just like a bank, we need a way for the payee to know that the previous owners did not sign any earlier transactions. For our purpose, the earliest transaction is the one that counts, so we don't care about later attempts to double spend. The only way to confirm the absence of a transaction is to be aware of all transactions. In the mint-based model, the mint was aware of all transactions and decided which arrived first. To accomplish this without a trusted party, transactions must be publicly announced, and we need a system for participants to agree on a single history of the order in which they were received. The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, majority of nodes agreed it was the first received. So how do we do this? Let's move on to part 3, timestamps. That solves that issue. The solution we propose begins with a timestamp server. A timestamp server works by taking a hash of a block of items to be timestamped and widely publishing the hash, such as in a newspaper or unsent post. 2 to 5, the timestamp proves that the data must have existed at the time. Obviously, in order to get into the hash, each timestamp includes a previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain with each additional timestamp reinforcing the ones before that. It's almost like a chain, like something's getting cut and this cannot work. So yeah, woo, blockchain. And here's the diagram. As you can see, the hash points to the next hash in the previous block. Pretty cool. Let's move on to part 4 that needs to be implemented is proof of work. To implement a distributed timestamp server on a peer-to-peer basis, we need to use proof of work system similar to Adams-Back's Hashcash 6. Rather than newspaper or unsent post, the proof of work involves scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. That will be the Genesis block. The average work required as exponential in the number of 0 bits required and can be verified by executing a single hash. For our timestamp network, we implement the proof of work by incrementing a nonce in the block unit, the block until a value is found. That gives the block's hash that requires 0 bits. Once a CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof of work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work. As later blocks are changed after it, the work is changed by the block, which would include redoing all blocks after it. So in order to change that, you'd have to change every block after that to make it a valid coin. So that makes it quite hard to do. So the blockchain technology of the proof of work, there's a limited time that allows it. With Bitcoin, it's every 10 minutes per block, per confirmation. So each confirmation takes 10 minutes. So if you want a long confirmation, maybe take 20 minutes, it may take 30, but that's how the proof of work system works. It's a limited time of slots to prove something, and then it gets distributed to everyone on the block. So the proof of work also solves the problem of determining representation in a majority decision, making if the majority were based on one IP address, one vote. It could be subverted by anyone able to allocate many IPs. Proof of work is essentially one CPU, one vote. The majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work effort invested in it. If a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest and outpace any competing chains. The modified a pass block, an attacker would have to redo the proof of work of the block and all blocks after it, and then catch up with and surpass the work of the honest nodes. We will show later that probability of a slower attacker catching up diminishes exponentially as subsequent blocks are added. To compensate for increased hardware speed and varying interest in running nodes over time, the proof of work difficulty is determined by moving average targeting an average number of blocks per hour. If they generated too fast, the difficulties increase. So, good to know how they're working with this. Let's move on. Part 5, the network. The steps to run the network are as follows. 1. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes. 2. Each node collects new transactions into a block. 3. Each node works on finding a different proof of work for its block. 4. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. 5. Nodes accept the block only if all transactions in it are valid and not already spent. 6. Nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block on the chain using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. Nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one and will keep working on extending it. If 2 nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously, some nodes may receive one or the other first. In that case, they work on the first one they received, but save the other branch in case it becomes longer. The tie will be broken when the next proof of work is found and one branch becomes longer. The nodes that were working on the other branch will then switch to the longer one. So that's how everyone's competing, mining, and all that's working. So yeah, this is how mining works here. Everyone's competing on a computing hash. So whoever has a stronger computer or more computers running, they got better chances of having the longest chain to be confirmed. So new transaction broadcasts do not necessarily need to reach all nodes as long as they reach many nodes. They will get into the block before long. Block broadcasts are also tolerant of drop messages. If a node does not receive a block, it will request when it receives the next block and realize it missed one. Moving on to part 6, incentive. By convention, the first transaction in a block is a special transaction that starts a new coin owned by the creator of the block. This adds incentive for nodes to support the network and provide a way to initially distribute coins into circulation. Since there is no central authority to issue them, the steady addition of a constant amount of new coins is analogous to gold miners expending resources to add gold to the circulation. In our case, it is the CPU time and electricity that is expended. The incentive can also be funded with transaction fees. If the output value of transaction is less than its input value, the difference is a transaction fee that is added to the incentive value of the block containing the transaction. Once a predetermined number of coins have entered a circulation, the incentive can transition entirely to transaction fees and completely inflation-free. The incentive may help encourage nodes to stay honest. If a greedy attacker is able to assemble more CPU power than all honest nodes, he would have to choose between using it to defraud people by stealing back his payments or using it to generate new coins. He'll have to find it more profitable to play by the rules, and such rules that favor him with more new coins than everyone else combined, than to undermine the system and the validity of his own wealth. So there's a time of how many blocks can be made. Currently it is 2021 and we are mining at least 900 new Bitcoin a day. And every 4 years there's a halving. We're coming up to the next one very soon. So that's going to be cut down to 350 a day. 2024 comes around. We are now down to 175. Then 2028 comes around and we're down. So it's getting smaller and smaller for the time. So we have incentive to mine cryptocurrency. It gives us value. It gives us proof of work. It gives us all that. So there is an incentive to mine these tokens to increase the network in the blockchain. So let's move on to part 7, reclaiming disk space. Once the latest transaction in a coin is buried under enough blocks, the spent transactions before it can be discarded to save disk space. To facilitate this without breaking the block's hash, transactions are hashed in a Merkle tree 725 with only the root included into the block hash. Old blocks can be then compacted by stubbing off branches of a tree. The pure hashes do not need to be stored. So as you can see here, transactions hashed in a Merkle tree is on the left, and on the right diagram, after pruning tx or t times 0 to dash 2 from the block, it goes on. So it gets quite complicated here. If you can understand this, you are a true programmer. A block header with no transactions would be about 80 bytes. If we suppose blocks are generated every 10 minutes, 80 bytes, 6 by 24 by 365, 4.22 megabytes per year, with computer systems typically selling with 2 gigabytes of RAM as of 2008 and Moore's law predicting current growth of 1.2 gigabytes per year, storage should not be a problem, even if the block header must be kept in a memory. So yeah, computers are updating. So there's no problem with this memory storage. Let's move on to part 8, simplified payment verification. It is possible to verify payments without running a full network node. A user only needs to keep a copy of the block headers of the longest proof of work chain, which he can get by querying network nodes, until he's convinced he has the longest chain and obtain the Merkle branch, linking the transactions to the block it's timestamped in. He can't check the transactions for himself, but by linking it to a place in the chain, he can see the network node has accepted it, and blocks added after it further confirm the network has accepted it. So you can't look specifically at one item, as this diagram shows right here, the longest proof of chain. But as you can see the next block, like, so he can't, like, there's one block right here in the very middle, that's where he has his transaction. He can't go into it exactly to see that's confirmed. But if he sees that the next block after it is confirmed, then that just proves the previous block has been done, transaction is settled, and he's in a sweet spot. So yeah, that's how it works. So that's how you prove it. So as such, the verification is reliable as long as honest nodes control the network, but is more vulnerable if the network is overpowered by an attacker. While network nodes can verify transactions for themselves, the simplified method can be fooled by an attacker's fabricated transactions for as long as the attacker can continue to overpower the network. One strategy to protect against this would be to accept alerts from network nodes. When they detect an invalid block, prompting the user's software to download the full block and alert a transaction to confirm that inconsistency, businesses that receive frequent payments will probably still want to run their own nodes for more independent security and quicker verifications. So, some come through issues. Let's move on. 9. Combining and splitting value. Although it would be possible to handle coins individually, it would be unwisely to make a separate transaction for every cent in a transfer. To allow value to be split and combined, transactions can multiple inputs and outputs. Normally, there will be either a single input from a large previous transaction or multiple inputs combining smaller amounts, and at most 2 outputs, one for the payment and one for the returning the change, if any back to the sender. So here it is in the diagram: transaction, in, out, so on. It should be noted that fan out, where a transaction depends on several transactions and those transactions depend on many more, is not a problem here. There is never the need to extract a complete standalone copy of a transaction history. And 10, moving on, privacy. The traditional banking model achieves a level of privacy by limiting access to information to the parties involved and the trusted third parties. The necessity to announce all transactions publicly preludes this method, but privacy can still maintain by breaking the flow of information in another place. By keeping public keys anonymous, the public can see that someone is sending an amount to someone else, but without information linking the transaction to anyone. This is similar to the level of information released by stock exchanges, where the time and size of individual trades, the tape, is made public, but without telling who the parties were. So here, as we can see, the traditional privacy model, identities and transactions, go to trusted third parties, and that goes to the counterparty, and then the public. In our new privacy model, we can see it goes from identities, transaction, public. Done. We just got rid of that trusted third party. Sweet. So as an additional firewall, a new key pair should be used for each transaction to keep them from being linked to a common owner. Some linking is still unavoidable with multiple input transactions, which necessarily reveal their inputs were owned by the same owner. The risk is that the owner of a key is revealed. Linking could reveal that other transactions that belong to the same owner. Let's move on. 11. Calculations. We consider the scenario of an attacker trying to generate an alternative chain faster than the honest chain. Even this accomplished, it does not throw the system open to arbitrary changes, such as creating value out of thin air or taking money that never belongs to the attacker. Nodes are not going to accept an invalid transaction as payment, and honest nodes will never accept a block containing them. An attacker can only try to change one of his own transactions to take back money he recently spent. So the race between the honest chain and an attacker chain can be characterized by binomial random walk. The success event is the honest chain being extended by one block, increasing lead by +1, and the failure event is the attacker's chain being extended by one block, reducing the gap by -1. The probability of an attacker catching up from a given deficit is analogous to a gambler's ruin problem. Suppose a gambler with unlimited credit starts at a deficit and plays potentially an infinite number of trials to try to reach break-even. We can calculate the probability he even reaches break-even, or that an attacker ever catches up with the honest chain, as follows. That's for number 8. So here's the equation right here. P stands for probability an honest node finds the next block. Q stands for the probability the attacker finds the next block. QZ, the probability the attacker will ever catch up from the blocks. And here's the equation. QZ equals, I want to say that's 1 over Q, no, that's 1 Q over P equals if P is less than or greater than, or less than or equal to Q, or if P is greater than Q. So that is some straight up calculus right there. I stopped taking calculus last year, but that is calculus work. So you gotta be smart. So the creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, is a genius, a very smart person who we do not know who he is. So given our assumption that P is greater than Q, the probability drops exponentially as the number of blocks the attacker has to catch up with increases. With the odds against him, if he doesn't make a lucky lunge forward early on, his chances become vanishingly small as he falls further behind. We now consider how long the recipient of a new transaction needs to wait before being sufficiently certain the sender can change the transaction. We assume the sender is an attacker who wants to make the recipient believe he paid him for a while, then switch it to pay back to himself after some time has passed. The receiver will be alerted when this happens, but the sender hopes it will be too late. The receiver generates a new key pair and gives a public key to the sender shortly before signing. This prevents the sender from preparing a chain of blocks ahead of time by working it continuously until he is lucky enough to get far enough ahead, then executing the transaction at the moment. Once transaction is sent, the dishonest sender starts working in secret on a parallel chain containing an alternative version of his transaction. The recipient waits until the transaction has been added to the block and Z blocks have been linked after it. He doesn't know the exact amount of progress the attacker has made, but assuming the honest blocks took the average expected time per block, the attacker potentially progress will be a poison distributed with expected value of, in chemistry, that was a frequency or a wavelength. I want to say that's a nu. It's like that Y. You can see it, but Y. So nu is equal to Z Q over P. Z times Q over P. So there's your equation. No, that's a frequency. To get the probability the attacker could still catch up now, we multiply the poison density for each amount of progress he could have made by probability he could catch up from that point on. Here's the equation. I cannot say that or pronounce that in words for you, but as you can see right here, or present to you, there is an equation. But by rearranging to avoid the summoning of the infinite tail of the distribution, here we get another equation, and that's what you will get. So yeah, that's what happens. It takes a really smart person to understand this. I am just reading it, I can barely get it. I can barely understand it, so if you want to fully understand this, takes quite a bit of knowledge. Because that's just like chemistry and calculus right off the bat, and then continue on. Converting to C code. What? So here's the code, the hashtag include and everything. Yep. So converting C code. This is what you'd use. I'm not a programmer. I'm not sure how that works. If you want to learn how to program, I'll throw a link to Ivan on Tech, but he does have courses to teach you how to program in crypto and blockchain tech. But yeah, there's the program you will use. And running some results, we can see the probability drop off exponentially with Z. So Q to 0, 1, here is the potentials, P possibility is 1, if Z becomes 1, 0, 2, so as the number goes down, or as Z becomes higher, the possibility of the attacker catching up gets extremely lower, so that is cool. I do understand that. Then Q is equal to 0, 3, when 0, 0, P1, so yeah, as you can see here, like the probability is always reducing as Z increases higher, and Z is time that's outflow. So solving for P less than 0.1% is what is taking place for the equation of the blockchain. So 12, in conclusion, we have proposed a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. We started with the usual framework of coins made from digital signatures, which provides strong control of ownership, but is incomplete without a way to prevent double spending. To solve this, we proposed a peer-to-peer network using proof of work to record a public history of transactions that quickly becomes computational and practical for an attacker to change if honest nodes control a majority of CPU power. The network is robust in its unstructured simplicity. Nodes work all at once with little coordination. They do not need to be identified since messages are not routed to any particular place and only need to be delivered on a best effort basis. Nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. They vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of the valid blocks by working on extending them and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with the consensus mechanism. And if you need any references, here you go down here, all below linked for you. But yeah, that is the blockchain. That is Bitcoin's white papers and how it was created. So this was invented back in 2009. Crazy. And to think, like, computers weren't that great, and for someone to have this idea to be able to get rid of third-party bankers, governments, to truly make you in control of your cryptocurrencies is just amazing. So I enjoyed that read. If you guys enjoyed that read too, please give this video a thumbs up, share this with your friends, and as always, I hope you got some knowledge from this video as I did myself, and I love it. I love sharing this information with you, and I look forward to giving you some more awesome videos later on. So as always, have a great day, great night, great morning, and the Sherpa is out.